What's up, everybody? It's Izzy. Today's a training day, so that means a Q&A. Let's get to it. I'm having trouble standardizing Smith squats. Any tips? So in reality, man, you're probably just going too heavy to use the same technique that you were using in the past. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, because when it comes down to standardization, it's just something that you do. It's like, how do I chew slower? You just chew slower, man. Like, just do it. Like, have the discipline to do it. So if you're just all over the place, it's because the weight is so heavy that it's distracting you. So what you need to do is lower the load and count your eccentric tempo, count your pause if you have to, and just make everything the same. Can you do chest and delts on the same day and then the next session do back instead of what you said? You can do whatever you want, man. But again, you got to keep in mind, why am I doing a full body split? If I was to take your suggestion, then I would be training push muscles every fourth day. I would be training my back muscles every fourth day, and I would be training my leg muscles every fourth day. So at that point, why am I even doing a full body split? It would make more sense to do push-pull legs and give each thing their own individual attention. So I wouldn't do that, because doing what I suggested will maintain a shoulder frequency of every other day, a tricep frequency that's every other day, and it just makes more sense for what my weak body parts are than what you're saying. Why should I train flat bench when I can do incline and train both heads of the pec? Oh boy, do I have some news for you, my friend. Guess what? Flat bench trains your upper pecs. It's just that it biases the middle and lower pecs more. I got some more news for you. Yes, incline also trains the upper and middle pecs. It just biases the upper pecs more. So why you would do flat is because it gives more of a maximal stimulation for your middle pecs compared to incline. They both train both heads. How would you transition to bodybuilding from powerlifting with your current knowledge? Just do it, man. Just pick a bodybuilding program and get started. Like, you don't need to dip your toesies in the water. You don't need to slowly take the Band-Aid off. Just rip the sucker off and just pick a program and start. The one thing that I will warn you, if you are an ex-powerlifter, is that you will have grown accustomed to becoming emotionally attached to numbers and using whatever technique allows you to lift the most weight possible. In bodybuilding, you're going to have to get rid of that attitude and learn to use the target muscles rather than just going A to B. I planned to deload for this week because I was feeling beat up. However, now all of a sudden I'm feeling better. Should I continue with the planned deload? So here's the thing about deloads, right? The vast majority of people are going to feel pretty good after like half of a deload. The problem is that while you may feel good, you could have dissipated some, but maybe not most of the fatigue that you've accumulated. And that means if you continue training from there, you might get like 2 more weeks of progression before you need another half deload week. And if you never fully deload, you can just kind of continue that cycle of like a little bit of training, a little bit of deload, little bit of training, a little bit of deload. So you can kind of go either direction with this, but just keep that in mind. Any difference in approaching an unexpected deload due to joint pain rather than fatigue? Well, for one, joint pain is a type of fatigue, right? So what I assume you mean is instead of like performance loss. So your performance hasn't gone down, it's just because your joints hurt. The key thing to keep in mind with joint pain and deloads is that joint pain is more responsive to absolute load than it is to volume reductions. So it can be very common for people in the first half of a deload to cut reps and cut volume but keep loads the same. When you're deloading solely because of joint pain, you actually want to cut absolute load the most. When you have performance loss, that's going to be most responsive to reductions in volume. So when you're deloading solely due to joint pain, make sure you cut the absolute load. You just want to avoid the training, but do so while cutting the loads more than you might in a deload due to performance loss. Why is being taller an advantage in powerlifting? We weren't talking about relative strength. We're talking about absolute strength. So that question the person asked me, at what point is being taller going to negatively impact your performance? And the answer to that is never. As far as raw absolute performance, being taller is always an advantage. Now, the one interesting facet of the super heavyweight class is that there is no weight limit. So theoretically, the taller you are, the better, because you can weigh more than your competitors and have more of it be muscle if you are taller. So even there, the advantage holds true. As far as like relative strength and dots, I mean, one, I don't care about that kind of thing, but two, I don't know the formulas intimately enough to say whether they favor high body weight lifters or not. What I can say is that in terms of absolute performance, raw absolute performance, being taller is always an inherent advantage. I only have access to a seated leg curl, so as a variation, I have started doing it one leg at a time. Have you ever tried this? No, I've never tried that because I have access to like a billion different leg curls. My gym has 3 different standing leg curls, like 4 different lying leg curls, and 3 different seated leg curls, so it's just not necessary for me. I would personally never train something unilaterally when I could do both legs at the same time unless there's some sort of advantage to unilateral training. Are cable crunches enough for complete development of the abs? It's probably all you really need to do, but if you really wanted complete development of the abs, very charitably, the abs have like 3 main functions that you could train in. Spinal flexion, right, which is what crunch motions are going to train. Anti-extension, so something like an ab wheel rollout. And then the lower abs do tend to assist in different kinds of hip flexion and raising the knees, right? So I think if you pair a crunch motion with a hanging leg raise, that's probably going to cover everything you need from a hypertrophy perspective. And then from a strength perspective and functionality perspective, adding something like ab wheel rollouts can bring that all together and train the abs at what their primary function actually is, which is an anti-extension. Why does the sports media pick on Anthony Davis? I think he's just perceived as a perennial underachiever who's always hurt and who could be doing a lot more in terms of scoring. But he's elite in so many ways, and one of those is just not shot creation, so people don't appreciate his game for what it is. If you eat at caloric maintenance for a day, but your protein is low, will muscle loss occur? So protein needs when calories are at maintenance are extremely low. I mean, it could be as low as like 0.4 to 0.5 grams per pound of protein. Maybe even less if we're talking about just pure maintenance. Now, the real question here is, why would you ever go a day without getting enough protein? Like, that is completely 100% in your control. This is the kind of stuff that, like, it drives me insane because you have people asking all these super technical questions about, like, lengthened bias and lengthened partials and what movement is optimal in terms of biomechanics. And then you have actual days where you're not eating enough protein? Are you kidding me? Are assisted Nordics a good option for people training at home to do knee flexion? I honestly think they're kind of shit. But here's the thing. You very specifically have specified that you're an at-home lifter. And when you're an at-home lifter, you have almost no options for doing knee flexion if you don't buy the equipment to do it. Now, I would personally still rather see most people doing something like a dumbbell between the feet, lying leg curl with their legs just hanging off the end of a bench, because that's going to have a nice lengthened bias to it, whereas something like a Nordic with a band is going to have a strength curve that's heavily short bias where you're like getting very little tension in the stretch. But if it's one of your only options, it's one of your only options. The belt that I am wearing is the Pioneer Fit Strongman Hybrid belt. And the reason why I have purchased this belt is not because I have a long torso. I'm 5'7". I don't have a long torso compared to anyone. In fact, I even have long legs relative to my height. The reason why I bought the belt is because it's a soft belt. And unlike a hard, thick powerlifting belt like the SBD belt, this doesn't interfere with my positioning or my range of motion on movements like hip hinges and leg presses. So instead of having to do those beltless, I can now do them with a soft belt and get the added stability benefits. Folks, that's the end of the video. You know what to do. Like the video if you like the video, questions and comments below, subscribe if you haven't already, and have a wonderful rest of your day.